Welcome, everyone. My name is Chuck Marone. I'm the founder and president of Strong Towns. Strong Towns is a nonprofit organization, a movement that is working to make our cities stronger, more prosperous, and better places to live. I'm also a civil engineer. I have extensive training in traffic engineering, in roadway design. 2 years ago, here at Strong Towns, we founded something called the Crash Analysis Studio, a process to demonstrate how we can examine and learn from fatal and traumatic automobile crashes. Today, we are getting together to share what we've learned through a year and a half of doing these studio sessions, findings, recommendations that local leaders can use to save thousands of lives. I want to thank you all for being here. This is a very important day for us. It's a very important day for street safety. I'm now going to call on my friend and colleague, Chris Allen, who's our Director of Partnerships here at Strong Towns, to lead us through this event. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Chuck, and thank you all of you for joining us today. As you go ahead and file in to the webinar, please feel free to share where you're from, what brought you here today. Little couple housekeeping notes before we get started. Please, we want this to be informative. We know how important this is. We're really excited. We take this very seriously to be here with you today, sharing our findings about how cities can learn from crashes to create safer streets today and tomorrow. So to that end, we've brought some national experts with some amazing experience, and you'll hear from them along with our president and founder, Chuck Marone. So as everybody's filing in, please note that there is at the bottom of your screen a Q&A button. If you guys have questions throughout this process, please feel free to go ahead and drop them in the Q&A. At the end of the press conference, there will be a time when we're going to assemble the experts that we brought in here from the panel and then answer those questions. So please drop those in the Q&A section there at the bottom. And Karen from Strong Towns will be filtering those back to me and back to the rest of the presenters today. So again, as Chuck highlighted, we are here to inspire, educate, and encourage cities to lead on this important issue. And to that end, we're going to be delivering some of our key findings and recommendations from the first 18 cities that have participated in the Strong Towns Crash Analysis Studio, which we do believe is a new analysis framework that cities can adopt to swiftly respond to crashes and impact current practices. And to that end, we've brought some speakers with us today that I'm going to jump in now and introduce. And so without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, guys, we're going to be jumping in now. Thank you so much for joining us. Those of you who are coming in now, thank you so much for being here. So today we are talking about our Beyond Blame report, how cities can learn from crashes to create safer streets. So we are being joined today by Steve Davis, the Assistant VP of Transportation Strategy for Smart Growth America, Lee Shum from the founder and director from Vision Zero Network, Ravinder Bala, the mayor of the city of Hoboken, and Melanie Alliston, the civil engineer practice director from Tool Design, some experts that we are so proud to have with us sharing the podium today, and our founder and president here at Strong Towns, Charles Marone. So again, for those of you who are just filing in now, please submit questions via the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen. And we'll follow up with this again at the end. So please send all press and media requests to Karen Douglas. But we are going to go ahead and get started and throw it over to Steve to talk about how his work with Smart Growth America has been impacting safer streets for your communities.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Davis from Smart Growth America. As noted, thank you, Chuck. Thank you, Strong Towns, for inviting us here today to participate. We're big admirers of the Crash Studio model. We love it. We've loved watching it. We're glad to be a part of talking about it and hopefully talking about some of the recommendations, things that we can do better. So really quick, I just want to walk through a couple of things here. Here's a list of countries with their road fatality rates per 100,000. These are countries from the developed world. Every single one of these countries you see on this list has smartphones. Every single country you see on this list has headphones, earbuds, they have alcohol, and they have drivers who occasionally make bad decisions, who speed, who are reckless. Yet The United States sits almost alone at the right-hand side of this chart. Traffic fatalities in the United States are a crisis. They have been a crisis for a long time. And while the rest of the world has seen dramatic improvements over the last couple decades, especially for people walking, biking, rolling, getting around outside of a vehicle, we have not experienced those gains. And in fact, in the United States, those numbers have gone the other direction. Why is that? And I think one reason is because most of these countries in here have a radically different approach to street design, choosing to design their roads for these flawed human people in the transportation system. They have sought to create, through design, a safer system with multiple layers of protection that ensures that any mistake does not have to be fatal. Here's a statement from Road Safety Sweden. I won't read the whole thing. You can read this if you like, but this contrasts the traditional approach that we have here in the United States, which is very much about blame and about finding a user who is culpable and pinning the blame on them, rather than looking at other factors that go into these fatalities, specifically with design. It is human to make a mistake, but mistakes should not come at the expense of a person's life or health. We want accidents that do not lead to serious consequences. This is a dramatic difference with the rest of the world and with the United States. And the result has been, especially when it comes to fatalities for people walking or biking, a pretty staggering increase over the last 30 years. I've been working on this report, Dangerous by Design, for Smart Growth America and the National Complete Streets Coalition, which is one of our programs, for more than a decade. And we are hitting 30-year highs. 7,522 people died in 2022. That does not touch the numbers of people that were severely injured in ways that they will carry for the rest of their life. This number is staggering. It's a 68% increase since 2011. Highest numbers in more than 30 years. And importantly, it's actually gotten relatively safer behind the wheel. The risk is being borne more and more and more each year by people outside of vehicles. A greater share of all of these traffic deaths are people outside of vehicles. So what can we do? I want to focus on two recommendations that are in this tremendous report that we want to laser right in on. One is the idea of making temporary changes to improve safety overnight. Far too often, we have to wait a long time for safety improvements on our streets. That is not necessary, as they highlight in this report. We do a lot of work with quick build demonstration projects that are temporary installations to test new street design improvements that improve safety and accessibility. Here's just a couple examples. I think the ones you see on the screen here are actually from South Bend. When Secretary Pete Buttigieg was the mayor there, we did some work there, did these demonstration projects, all of which had marked improvements on safety. Over the last 3 or 4 years, through our National Complete Streets Coalition, we have done a model called the Complete Streets Leadership Academy. It's taken a few different names, but we've done these safety demonstration projects in across, I think, more than 10 states now. And all of them have led to changes in driver behavior that results in slower speeds, that results in safer streets for everyone that needs to use them. The data bears this out. Here's just a couple examples, one from Connecticut in the last year, and one from South Bend a couple years ago. Every single instance when temporary improvements were made, sometimes using paint, sometimes using barrels, cones, bollards, any number of incredibly low-cost, flexible materials, resulted in slower speeds. Slower speeds are essential to improving safety on our streets. We will not dramatically improve these numbers that we showed from Dangerous by Design until we manage to reduce speeds in urban areas, in places where people are, where complexity happens, where we're trying to create a place and encourage business rather than just a place to pass through. Lastly, the second recommendation I want to focus on is their talk about prioritizing safety. Strong Towns is all about the bottom up. As a DC-based national nonprofit, I'd like to focus just for a second on the top down. We want to do these two things and meet in the middle, but this is well within Congress's power with the federal money that's given out to states, some of which makes its way down to cities, to prioritize safety over speed. We're fond of saying that you cannot have safety as a priority with 2 or 3 or 4 other priorities. If you do, you don't prioritize safety. It will lose out every time it comes in conflict with other overarching goals like reducing congestion, avoiding delay. Safety has to be the top priority for the designs of our roadways, our streets, within urban areas where people are, where we're trying to create a place worth visiting. Federal funding should require these approaches that put safety first. This can also happen from the bottom up, as this report highlights, and I look forward to hearing more about that today. So I'll hand it back to Chris. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here today.
Thank you so much, Steve, and the great work that you guys have done at Smart Growth America and your Dangerous by Design report is really working to help leaders prioritize safety over speed, and we're really proud to have you with us today. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Leah Shahum, the Vision Zero Network founder and director, and she is going to share some of Vision Zero's experience and how they are working alongside Strong Towns to envision safer streets for all. So Leah, we'll hand it over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having us. Really appreciate it. First thing I'll say is read this report Strong Towns put out. I'm really impressed with it. I'm really excited about it. Can't wait to use the recommendations in our work. So I'm going to share a little bit from Vision Zero Network's perspective. If y'all don't know, we're a nonprofit, a small nonprofit supporting local communities around the country who are committing and working towards Vision Zero. So you probably know what Vision Zero is, the goal of 0 traffic deaths or severe injuries among all road users. That's walking, biking, driving, motorcycle, scooter, everybody. Vision Zero is. I'm going to share what Vision Zero is not. Vision Zero is not a slogan. It's not just a tagline. It's not even just a program. It is a fundamentally different way of doing things. It is a paradigm shift. Doesn't mean it's hard necessarily, but it does mean it's a big change. And that's why I really appreciate the report that you all are putting out, because it covers a lot of it. So what I'm going to kind of walk through is, probably most folks would agree, yes, we want safety. We all agree in the goal of 0. And kudos to the U.S. Department of Transportation for coining this. If Vision Zero is our goal, a safe system is how we get there. So kind of breaking down when I say, Vision Zero is not just the goal. Yes, it is a goal, but how do we actually get there? And I'm going to share a couple key components of the safe system approach and examples of how that's going, where it's being done well. And I think it fits, perfectly in with the recommendations that Strong Towns is making today. So one of the changes or shifts, paradigm shift, I would say, is that it's really shifting from the traditional ease where we've been quite siloed, right? That's an engineering problem. That's an enforcement problem. Never the twain shall meet, right? I'm over exaggerating a bit, but we really have been siloed, and really thinking about this work more cohesively and more together, and really thinking about safe travel for all in these different categories: safe streets, safe speeds, safe vehicles, safe people. And you'll see I've circled what we think are the most, or the pieces that we have a lot of control over at the local level, which is safe streets and safe speeds, and need to really focus on. So won't go through all these, but some of the examples, if you're unfamiliar with this Vision Zero or safe system approach, how does it differ than the traditional approach? And just to highlight one or two that I think fit again with the report released today. The second one, with the traditional approach, whether it's intentional or not, we focused a lot of attention, or we expect a lot from trying to influence people's behavior. And sure, we do want people to behave safely, right? But in the safe system approach, what we're thinking is, okay, how do we design the systems knowing there will be human mistakes, just like Steve talked about? Another one at the bottom, I'll highlight the one at the bottom. Traditionally, we've reacted to crash history. Wow, that's a bad problem area. Let's address it after the fact, after there have been terrible injuries and deaths there. Well, we're going to need to keep doing that, sure. But isn't it better if we're more proactively identifying and addressing risks before they happen? Again, as the report really shows. So just a couple more examples of that. How do we move away from or move beyond this idea of posters telling everyone to be safe? And, personally, I find this poster very offensive, to really actually designing streets and systems, vehicles, everything for safety. How do we move beyond the idea of ticketing for speeding and towards a safe system approach, which is actually designing the streets, just like Steve talked about, for appropriate speeds and for safety, rather than after the fact ticketing someone, which has its own host of problems, of course. How do we really think about who makes the biggest change, right? Are individuals responsible in general for their own safety? Sure, they are. But we really need to expand that thinking and look at how system planners and policymakers are should be very responsible for how our streets are designed, et cetera. So it's really looking upstream. You can't, I would say to anyone on the call, if you're committing to Vision Zero, it's not just about that goal. It's not just about those words. It's not just about your mayor saying, hey, we commit to Vision Zero. It's about making this very systemic, fundamental change. And after me, you're going to hear from Mayor Ballerup from Hoboken, who's really doing this there. So I won't say too much more there. But one more example is, again, the idea of reacting on crash history. Okay, we have a problem here versus proactively identifying situations, environments in which there is higher risk than there needs to be, and then proactively going out and saying, hey, there has not been a serious crash at this intersection, but this intersection has the same design as that other intersection that has been a problem. So how do we change it before there are problems? And some of those examples, I would say, or some great examples quickly, are Philadelphia. And let me pause and say, nobody's got it perfect. And I'm not going to stand here or sit here and tell you like, wow, this city's doing it all perfect. Nope, nobody yet. That said, we are seeing encouragement. So Philadelphia, I want to give them credit where they are investing in complete streets projects. They've measured and seen a 34% decrease in fatalities and severe injuries by doing what we think are the right things, right? Changing those road designs in many ways. Fremont, California, similarly, 45% reduction in 5 years of severe and fatal injuries by reducing speeds, building out traffic calming, doing all sorts of important things like better lighting as recommended in the report. So a lot around speed reductions, a lot about designing for the right speed, a safer speed, a lot about better visibility for people walking and biking. Similarly, I'm sure you've heard New York's story. Again, not there by any means and challenging, but in the first 5 years of Vision Zero's work, huge decreases in traffic deaths overall, particularly pedestrian deaths, as the national numbers were going up. So I think that's important to note. But again, what did they do? They did not just say the words Vision Zero and throw up signs everywhere. They lowered speed limits. They redesigned roads. They did systematic traffic calming treatments, left turn treatments, systematically. Speed cameras, that's a whole other issue we could spend time on. Similarly, Alexandria, Virginia, kudos, achieved zero traffic deaths in 2023. And again, did a lot of concrete changes that are recommended in this report, citywide. And Jersey City, similarly, year of zero traffic deaths by implementing tactical urbanism and proven safety treatments on the road citywide. And I'm going to wind down with our favorite example, which is Hoboken, New Jersey. Hopefully folks have heard great success there. They have gone more than 7 years now, I believe. The mayor will say more, with zero traffic deaths. And what they're doing is not, no offense, but not rocket science. What they're doing is leadership. What they're doing is redesigning streets for safety, really daylighting intersection, adding high visibility crosswalks, reducing speeds, and then designing for lower speeds. And they are seeing success, but really that is about leadership. And I'm going to wind down, say thank you so much and put in a plug for everybody on the call. If it's not yet on your calendar, please check out World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims, November 17th. It's a chance to really bring attention to the work you're doing on the ground for safe streets. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Leah. We really appreciate it, and the leadership that you guys have to bringing the safe system approach to U.S. cities and your work towards advocating for quick low cost responses to improve street safety it is, nearly the identical approach that we often advocate for here at Strong Towns. So we appreciate you and all of your great work. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And next we're going to hear, you heard Leah allude to this, we're going to hear from Mayor Ravindra Bala of Hoboken. And Mayor Ravi, go ahead and thank you so much for joining us, and we'll hand it off to you.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you to Chuck and the entire Strong Towns team. It was great to hear from both Steve Davis and Leah Shaham. And I'll touch on a lot of the points that they did, but sort of give you a real life example from a sitting mayor, my trajectory and what I've seen over the course of years, using Hoboken as almost a case study for a community that can implement some of these incremental changes over the course of time and see actual positive results. So I come to you today not just as an elected official, but also as a father living in a small, densely populated city, the city of Hoboken. We're the fourth most densely populated city in the country. We're about 65,000 residents crammed into 1 square mile, which creates a lot of challenges with respect to road safety. I realized that first when I came to Hoboken, about 25 years old, out of law school, just a young bachelor. And I noticed that crossing the main street, Washington Street, was actually not a safe thing to do because there was no signalization. You actually had to walk halfway into the street to know whether or not it was safe to cross. And when I had my wife and I, we had our first daughter, I was doing that with a baby stroller trying to cross a main street. And it was just a very unsafe condition for a pedestrian. That's when this topic first came on my radar about 20 years ago. And it really hit home, I would say, when I was a member of the city council in the city of Hoboken. And there's the death of a 95-year-old woman named Agnes Acera. And Agnes was crossing Washington Street, which is our main drag, and Fifth Street. Unfortunately, got into a collision with a motor vehicle, and at 95 years old, lost her life. Looking back, I see that could have been prevented by low-cost safety measures through a program like Vision Zero. And that's when it really got on my radar. I eventually transitioned to serving the city as its mayor, and in 2019 launched our Vision Zero program, which is more ambitious than most cities in the sense that we seek to not only eliminate traffic fatalities, but also eliminate serious traffic deaths by the year 2030. In the area of traffic fatalities, we've gone about 7, approaching 8 years without a single fatality traffic related in the city of Hoboken. And with respect to serious injuries, we have not achieved our Vision Zero, but we've reduced serious injuries by about 68% over the last couple of years alone. So we've made substantial progress in that regard. So how do you do it? A key lesson here is that it does not have to be expensive. It can start with low cost, quick build projects that make an immediate impact. So what do I mean? Let me give you a case study that touches upon some of those quick build, immediate, low cost impacts. There is a high crash network in the city of Hoboken at Willow Avenue and 11th Street. It's right next to a school. So we want to make sure that we target areas that are high risk, where there are vulnerable populations, schools, senior living centers, parks are some of those locations. At this area of Willow and 11th in the city of Hoboken, we implemented a series of measures to make it more pedestrian friendly and safer for people taking their children to school, There's also a senior center right next to the school to make it more a more safer environment for people who are from vulnerable communities from a pedestrian safety standpoint. So installing high visibility crosswalks, very easy to do, but has a very big impact. Improving sight lines by installing plastic bollards. There's something that most of you, I'm sure, know called daylighting. Daylighting can take a lot of different forms. It's essentially creating a barrier at an intersection, which serves to improve sight lines for pedestrians and motorists, which would reduce collisions. So daylighting can take the form of bike racks. It can take the form of rain gardens, which help absorb water in cities that are vulnerable to climate change. It can also take the form of simply placing bollards within an intersection. And placing those flexible plastic bollards in areas that are that are vulnerable is not expensive. It's not expensive at all. You can actually make an intersection much safer by just installing, in our experience here in Hoboken, installing 3 or 4 low-cost plastic flexible bollards for a grand total cost of $140. That $140 can save a human life. It can save the life of a child. It can save the life of a senior. So I would submit, in our experience, that type of low-cost investment and quick build solution and the disproportional positive impact it can have in safety makes it well worth contemplating in other communities. By doing that, you can also, the third thing I would mention is curb extensions. Curb extensions have the ability, they call them bump outs, what have you. They have the ability to reduce crossing distances between one part of a street to another. That makes it easier for somebody who's a senior, somebody who is walking across the street with a stroller, to not be within the flow of traffic for as long as they might have other been. Narrowing the street, calming the street, lowering speed limits, all of that in the aggregate has, in our experience, an appreciably positive impact. So we installed 4 new curb extensions at those intersections at 11th and Garden Street. Another effort I would point to, and it was alluded to by, I believe, Leah, is simply traffic calming by reducing the speed limit. We initiated a program in Hoboken called 20 is Plenty. As I said, we're 1 square mile. There is no need within the city of Hoboken to drive a car more than 20 miles an hour. Within vulnerable areas, parks, senior centers, schools, the speed limit is actually 15 miles an hour. And when you enter the city of Hoboken and you see that signage that the speed limit is 20 miles an hour, our hope is that it has a psychological impact upon the motorist to say, hey, okay, now you're in Hoboken, let's slow down, be aware, be conscious of your surroundings, and hopefully it'll have a positive impact. We're very fortunate that through these incremental changes, no silver bullet, there's no like one magical solution that's going to solve all your problems, but by low cost, small but incremental changes over the course of time, you can make a difference. And we've seen that difference in Hoboken. The next thing I just want to go into before I wrap up is, how do you do it? This is not a top-down approach. This is not by executive order from the mayor. This is not by fiat from the governing body. This is a community process where you need to bring all stakeholders to the table. That includes public safety, your police chief, police officers, traffic enforcement officers, local bike advocates, local pedestrian street safety advocates, anybody who has a stake, regular citizens who want to be a part of positive change in your city or your town. Bringing them together, community engagement, listening to the ideas and the concerns of residents helped me and helped my team identify where Hoboken's vulnerabilities were. Was it this intersection that we had to prioritize over another intersection? And that localized knowledge might not come from the mayor's office. It might not come from my parking and transportation director's office. It could come from a mother who takes her kids to school every day and sees, in actuality, dangerous conditions on the ground. So it's important for leaders to listen to the people that they represent, because that on the ground street knowledge is critical to making stronger and safer communities. So in closing, my call to action is that cities are uniquely positioned to act swiftly and to learn what truly contributes to fatal crashes and to adapt to safety demands of changing urban environments. So as a father, a community leader, I urge every city to embrace the responsibility to protect the most vulnerable. The cost of inaction is too great, and solutions are within reach. Believe it, if we can do it in Hoboken, you can do it in your own community. So let's make sure we lead that change to save lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Bala. We greatly appreciate not only your time, but your commitment to service for your community and serving as an example for all of us here today about what can happen when a community has a leader and that community rallies around them, about what can happen in the transformation that can happen in a community when people care as much as you and everybody else you've inspired there in your community. So Mayor Bala, thank you so much for your service, and thank you for joining us today. We are going to transition now to Melanie Allison of Tool Design. Melanie, I will hand it off to you.
All right. Thanks very much, Chris. So, Tool Design, I just want to tell you a little bit about us first. And we're a company that was founded on creating safer streets for all modes. It's all we do all day, every day. It is our job. And so I've been asked today to talk a little bit about what we as engineers in the industry can do to help cities and towns, make their own streets safer. And so I'm going to bring up a couple of slides here. All right. So, first and foremost, as engineers, we need to continue to be leaders and embrace our role as experts. We have a duty to educate the public, our elected officials, the media, and ourselves. As I noted in the podcast with Chuck yesterday, that we still don't teach this stuff in school. We also need to not shy away from uncomfortable conversations. We need to be truthful about safety trade-offs. It's not always making it better for every mode. We need to be comprehensive in our analyses, and we need to counteract misinformation when we come across it. From a more practical perspective, we in the engineering industry can help out in a lot of ways. We can participate in your rapid response teams and in your road safety audits. We can help you develop tools to help make your street safer. And in the inset on this slide, you'll see 3 examples of that I believe are going to come as part of a resource packet after this press conference today. But we can also help you train your staff. We do an awful lot of teaching clients every day. We teach our colleagues in the industry, teaching them how to apply the knowledge that we've built in the tools that we've put together. We also can, help you implement projects large and small, although I would also want you to know that it does not take, as Mayor Bala said, it does not take a multi-million-dollar capital improvement project for you to take action. In a more practical sense, we can also help you be more proactive in preventing crashes. We've got a framework now for systemic safety analysis on a citywide basis that can, as others have said, help you identify those combinations of conditions that can contribute to crashes. And what's another really important thing that engineers can help you with is finding the money. If you do decide that you need that larger project, we can help you write that compelling argument that's going to win you grant money, and move you along your path to solving the problem permanently, after you've implemented those quick build solutions. And as a result of this continued leadership, I would like to, point out that we have seen a lot of change in our industry, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years, as there's really been an acceleration in, the guidance and the projects and things that are making streets safer for everyone. And, many of you know that much of the guidance that we engineers and designers rely on was developed in the mid-1980s. And it was very much focused on keeping people safe in their vehicles. But we've learned a lot since then. We've learned that some of that guidance had unintended consequences for non-motorized users. We've learned that city streets are not highways and serve many other purposes than just getting people from point A to point B. In addition to meeting the needs of motorists and pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users, they also serve as logistical hubs and drivers of economic growth to grow local businesses. They serve as social spaces that promote a sense of community and identity. All the others before me have stated we've learned that reducing vehicle speeds save lives. We've learned that improving the legibility of our intersection designs helps us manage user expectations by separating different modal users in space and time, and that results in fewer crashes. And again, we've learned that planning for human error is critical to improving safety. And the mindset is changing for the better. It's getting better and helping support cities as they adapt their streets for all modes to be safer, and that's all modes, including the drivers. We've seen over the past couple of years, especially, the guidance is changing. We have a new, AASHTO Green Book, we have a new MUTCD, we have new PROAG to reflect what we've learned. Industry-wide, our practitioners are applying the new thinking to both addressing existing safety issues and proactively identifying and eliminating the future ones. And we have new funding sources. The Federal Safe Streets for All grant program is a great example. It provides a framework for citywide analysis, and it provides funding for both planning and implementation for cities to make their streets safer. And, we know why people are dying on city streets. It isn't an accident. And I'm gonna, just lead into Chuck's presentation of the final report on the Crash Analysis Studio framework, but it is a great tool that cities can adopt today. You can go home from this press conference and implement that framework within your city this afternoon. It's adaptable. It can be used at your most notorious crash site and everywhere else. It encourages cities to look at crashes from a broader perspective, including not just that, tiny little area where the crash itself occurred, but it encourages us to look at things like land use, network connectivity, legibility of the surrounding streetscape. It does include a more diverse group of participants than a typical road safety audit would. It includes those locals, those advocates, the people that see the near misses every day. And it gives cities the tools that they need to look at crashes in a different way and work to solve those underlying safety issues proactively. And with that, I will turn it back over to Chris and Chuck.
Thank you so much, Melanie. We greatly appreciate it. And we've heard from an amazing group of panelists here today. And as we transition to Chuck, we did just want to highlight that it's so easy to be one of these elected officials or be an engaged community member and not know that there are great teams out there like Tool Design who are ready to come alongside you and help you do the really, really good work that needs to get done in your community. So it's not just taking that step, but sometimes it's finding the right allies. And so we really appreciate Melanie taking some of her time to come and share with us today and talk about the great work they're doing at Tool. And with that, we'll hand it off to Chuck Marone, the president and founder here at Strong Towns, who's going to talk to us just a little bit more about the report and about some of our findings and how you can take those into your community.
Thank you, friend. So everyone has access to the report now. If you don't have it, you will get a link at the end of this session. We're going to have this video made available to everybody. And also the report is now available at strongtowns.org/crash studio. When we look at traffic safety over time, we recognize that since the end of World War II, we have dramatically reduced the rate of death on our roads, particularly on our highways. Engineers are really, really good at building safer systems. Even so, what we have found is that our safety efforts have plateaued over the last 2+ decades. We've actually reached a point where, despite spending millions and millions of dollars on traffic safety, we're not seeing improvement in the death rate, in the rate of traumatic injury. In fact, in many places, it's actually going in the wrong direction. Part of what's not working is our underlying assumptions. In the report, you will see we talk about how we can question, or how we need to question, some of these myths that have crept into our system that are preventing us from taking the next step and actually eliminating these deaths that we've plateaued on, that we've not been able to get rid of. For example, we have this persistent myth that crashes are caused by driver mistakes. Well, yes, drivers make mistakes. Every single crash that was part of this studio, every single crash that we have analyzed had many, many factors that contributed to it. We have a myth in our traffic safety realm that crashes are accidents and they are mostly unpreventable. The reality is that crashes are the result of many factors. And a lot of those, in fact, almost all of those, are things that cities can address. We have a notion that we culturally believe that streets are designed to be safe, but that the humans are broken. The people who are using them are the dangerous ones. But the reality is, in most of the crashes we looked at, people were using the streets in very reasonable ways. People were going about their lives without being reckless, without doing things that you would say that this is not a safe kind of behavior. And crashes happened anyway. Streets are designed and built in a way that makes them dangerous, even for the most careful of drivers. There is a myth that we have that cities are powerless to make streets safer. And this is really the one that we want to deal with today. We often defer to the federal government and say it's their role to come and do this. The state DOT needs to come and do this. We're looking to automobile manufacturers to make changes. We're looking for tech companies to make our streets safer. The reality, and this is the urgent reality, is that there are many, many things that cities can do. There's many things that local leaders can do. People who care in their community, there's a lot of things that we can do. And many of those are quick, and they are cheap, and they are easy to do, and they will make our streets substantially, substantially safer. The crash analysis studio process is designed, and what we have put together in this report is designed to give local leaders a path, a way to take action, a way that is city-led, that is led by us. It comes from us at the local level. It results in immediate action, immediate things we can do to make our streets safer, to respond to crashes, to learn from the traumatic injuries that happen in our community. And it is accessible. You don't have to be a licensed engineer. You don't have to be a technical professional. You don't have to have some expertise in order to do this. We all have the capacity to contribute. Any city can do this, regardless of size, regardless of capacity. I know we're all amazed by Hoboken, and we should be. I've seen some people ask questions in the Q&A. Okay, this is great. This is a big city with a lot of capacity. I'm telling you, what they have done is stuff that we can do in our cities as well, regardless of the size. So 18 different communities joined in working on this process. And there were findings that were unique to each crash. Each crash has its own unique things we can learn from. When we examined all 18 crashes, what we found was that there were common threads among them. And so I want to share these common threads as kind of the highlight, recognizing that each crash is going to have its own unique characteristics. The first thing that we found common across many, many crashes was that high-speed road design in urban areas was a contributing factor. Again and again and again, we saw that highway design standards were brought into complex urban areas. This induced people to drive faster than what was otherwise safe. And that high speed was a contributing factor. And not only high speed of the individual in the crash, but when we looked at and studied the site, we found everybody speeding, right? This was ubiquitous across the community. Second, design that inadequately accounts for people biking and walking. This is something that you hear Vision Zero, Leah say all the time, we're not adequately doing. We saw instances where the city would plan for and zone for a residential development. The city would then design a 4-lane highway, in a sense, through the middle of this. And then on the other side, zone for and plan for not only commercial development, but schools and parks and other things, fully knowing just by this design that they were going to have lots of vulnerable people crossing this area. We are doing things with the left hand that we can easily coordinate with the right hand that we just fail to do over and over again. Dangerous intersection design was another recurring issue. Not only are intersections the place where we have the most degree of conflict and the most traumatic, lethal crashes, we actually saw designs where we were accelerating vehicles into intersections. These are things that we would do on highways. These are things that we would do on regional roadways. But when we do them on city streets, slip lanes and other type devices, we're actually doing things that really ramp up the risk for people. And then visibility and lighting issues. We saw again and again and again, places where we had adequately lit driving surfaces in ways that put people on bikes, people walking, people in wheelchairs on the edge of the road in glare or in shadow, making them not visible to drivers, even drivers that were driving at the right speeds with the proper amount of safety. When we look at this, we recognize that cities have the capacity to address these factors. Cities have the capacity to actually do something about this. In fact, cities, in most cases, are the only ones who can. The amount of death that we have on our roadways today is not going to be solved by the federal government taking action alone. It will not be solved by state DOTs reforming themselves and changing their approach. It really takes everyone. And a lot of what we see today, Steve showed that compelling graphic today of the pedestrian deaths rising dramatically. These are issues that city leaders need to lead on. These are issues that only we can solve in a bottom-up way. It is in a sense, the last remnant of traffic safety. We do highways extremely well. We do regional roadways fairly well from a safety standpoint. It is when we get into our cities big, cities small, cities medium size, all across the board, that what we see is that our design is not safe. The way we approach it is not resulting in safety. We are seeing tens of thousands of people die, and we actually have the capacity to do it. In fact, we are the only ones who really can. You can go right now and get a copy of the report, Crash Studio, strongtowns.org/Crash Studio. We invite you to share it with others. We invite you to talk about it. And I know Chris, who I'm going to hand it over to now, is going to invite everybody to be part of that solution. We at Strong Towns and the other partners that have been on this call today are all interested in helping move this conversation forward, helping you get your own local bottom-up safety approach going so that we can actually address these long-standing safety issues that are within our grasp to fix. Thanks, Chris.
Absolutely, Chuck. Thank you so much. And thanks again to all the rest of our panelists. Out of respect for everyone's time, we're going to jump right into Q&A. And so for our first question, I wanted to send this first to Steve. And then to Chuck to follow up there, how important is local control over roadways for implementing this framework and making cities safer? That's a question we saw come through in several different forms in the Q&A, and we'd love to have you, Steve, speak to that first, and then Chuck follow up.
Sure. So two things come to mind. One is that, yes, local control can be very important, and that's why I love the focus with this report and with the work that Chuck and Strong Towns have done on what cities can do on the streets that they control, right? So when they control the street, there is nothing getting in the way. There is no state standing in their way with an army of engineers or design guidebook. And so all of the things that they have highlighted in this report, you can go and do on those streets, right? It's a matter of convincing the people that you need to convince at that very local level, from the bottom up. It is also true that our most dangerous roadways are not controlled by cities, with some exceptions. They are controlled by states. 2/3 of all fatalities in urbanized areas happen on roads that are owned by the states. And in most places, roads that are over 4 lanes, you see a 4-lane road or the 5-lane road with the suicide lane down the middle. Those are almost always controlled by a state. But that's not to say that there's not something that cities and locals and residents can do. You can go do a crash analysis studio on a state road. Your city traffic engineer may lack the control to go out and, employ a temporary improvement like we talked about it, but you can absolutely get to the bottom of what's causing accidents on the dangerous corridor, the dangerous intersection, highlight those things, and shame the people that are in control into doing something. So yes, local control is very important. It makes it easy to do some of the right things on streets that cities own. But I think there's a big role for data collection. Starting to do if your state is MIA on the most dangerous corridors with even tracking, near misses or what's contributing to the numbers of deaths or where the deaths occurring. Cities and locals and advocates and strong town supporters can do those things, and start to shine a light on the things that need to be done by other people.
Steve's organization has done a fantastic job pushing for reform, pushing state DOTs to change how they do things. But we have both seen that the most effective places on the ground for change are where you have a local culture of safety. When you have city officials, when you have city staff, when you have the broader community who's bought into a culture of traffic safety, they can actually go credibly to the DOT and say, hey, we're not asking you to fix your road. We're asking you to be part of a system where we are making the entire community safer. And the crash analysis studio approach, the approach we outlined in this report, the approach of taking and using those temporary traffic control to go out and make immediate changes, to study that, to respond to crashes. This is all about building a culture of safety so that as Transportation for America, as Smart Growth America continues their work in pushing to reform DOTs, cities can credibly join in that conversation and say, hey, here's where we're at. We need you to catch up to us. I know there's a lot of people who want the DOTs to change and think if we just yell at them, they will. We have to actually build a culture of safety ourselves, and then they will follow us.
That's great. Thank you so much, Chuck. Lee, I want to send this one to you. How do you respond to the argument that people should just be better drivers and better pedestrians? Most people think they're better drivers than the average, and they expect everyone else to be as competent as them.
So true. What a great question. I think we spent way too long kind of spinning in this, I don't know, vicious cycle of, oh, but I could do this or I can't do this. The reality, and I think the analysis done by Strong Towns and a ton of work done by folks like Smart Growth America show there are very, very, very consistent and predictable results to certain system decisions we make, right? Or maybe lack of decisions sometimes. So I think I would say, these are not for the most part random bad behavior things. So there certainly is bad behavior, yes, of course, out there. But how do we, I think the great thing about this approach with the crash analysis studio and other things is thinking, hey, wow, why do we see so frequently this result, a bad crash, a bad injury, sometimes traffic deaths, when a vehicle is making a left turn on this kind of street? I won't get too specific, but there's just consistent, sadly, like tragically consistent patterns. And it is, I would say, irresponsible of us and certainly not effective, right? Definitely not effective to be ignoring those patterns. So I would say, you don't want to argue with somebody per se, like, oh, should someone drive drunk? Of course not, right? And there's lots of things one can do to try and discourage people from driving drunk, just as an example. And we also have so much more control over the system of, again, street design, how speeds are set, lighting, vehicles. We hadn't talked about that, but of course, vehicle design that will encompass not only that inevitable decision, bad decision somebody makes, but everybody else. So, I would try, I would talk to somebody about saying, hey, I hear you about people having responsibility, and let me show you a little bit about the facts of the trends that we see, the patterns we see. And really, as somebody said earlier, like, it speaks for itself. Like, let's let the facts speak for themselves and then make change.
I feel like in no other realm are we so eager to blame the user of the system. In any other place, when there's repeated deaths and injuries that occur because of a design, we never look and say, well, you didn't use that blender correctly, or you didn't use your oven correctly. We're like, how do we fix this? And here's the reality. When it comes to highways, engineers have actually gone and done this. I mean, in the 1950s and 60s, the death rate on our highways was intense. It was overwhelming. And engineers looked at that and said, all right, humans are not perfect. They make mistakes. How do we design this so that their mistakes do not result in fatalities? We've not in the United States, and Steve, you showed this in your chart, where other countries have asked the hard question, how do we account for drivers who are human? We have not done that here in the United States in a real way, where we've said, all right, we have to design for the humans we have, not the humans that we wish were perfect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you all for that. Melanie, wanted to start with you on this one and then let Chuck follow up. What can residents and city leaders do to combat the belief that simply adding more signage will solve all of their traffic safety problems?
Interesting that you asked that particular question. One of the things in the crash analysis studios, both of the crash analysis studios I participated in, one of the main things that was contributing to lack of visibility was sign clutter along the street side. And so, it really, there's kind of a sweet spot. You don't put in so many that they keep you from, seeing the pedestrians and cyclists and other things that are around them, or seeing, other drivers coming out of side streets at them. But you need enough to get the point across to make that intersection or that road corridor legible. And so it really, what we need to do is get it right, and keeping not just, the rules in mind that say we need to have a sign here, but thinking about what that does in the larger context. And so I would encourage people to look at that larger context, not just the rule book says I need to put a sign here.
Well, I think when we look too, most crashes happen within a very short distance of where people live and where people work. These are places that they're routinely driving, and it's the routine nature of the drive that makes them not read the signs. Like, I've been down this road 100 times. I'm not reading the sign every time. And so they start to blend into the background, and they don't communicate the message that we think we are. The road design, the street design is what is communicating the message, not all the little, things we're trying to shout at people as they drive by.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Again, I know we're just a couple minutes over time. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today, including the mayor, who had to step off and get back to making a city a better place. And then I also want to thank all of you for joining us. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to come and discuss not just the findings from these report, but the expertise from our panelists shared with us today, and then the discussion we were able to have in the Q&A. Just some housekeeping notes. We will be following up and answering all questions after we conclude the call today. Press contacts, please reach out to Karen Douglas, and we'll get her email there in the chat so that all of you have it. We will be, any questions, any interview coordination, please run that through Karen from this point forward. And also one quick note before I hand it off to Chuck to give us some closing words and send us out. If you are interested and curious about how you can bring more positive change to your community and what the next steps, if you are ready or equipped to take those in your community, you will be following up with you about a presentation on October 25th. So everybody will be getting an email about that and a follow-up from this. But we will be having Chuck and I will be speaking with everybody there on October 25th about how you can take these steps that we have outlined in our presentation that you will also be receiving from Karen after this, and some of the great ideas and the insight and the thought leadership brought to you by the rest of our panelists here today. So again, I want to thank Chuck and all the other panelists, and then the team here at Strong Towns for getting this report together after the work we've been able to come alongside these 18 communities and do over the last year and a half. So thank you all for being here, and I want to hand it to Chuck to send us out.
Thanks, Chris. And I just want to say thanks to everybody for being here. You're looking at some of the national leaders in this conversation. Steve at Smart Growth for America and the work that they're doing at Transportation for America is really moving things forward in terms of traffic safety. The Dangerous by Design stuff is really, really critical work. I am a deep admirer of Leah and the work that the Vision Zero Network is doing. This is stuff that around the world is like the premier stuff. Here in the US, I think we are starting to see momentum there. There's certainly a lot of leadership. And then Melanie and Tool Design, this is the firm nationally that is leading these efforts. It means a lot to me to have these three here. And the mayor of Hoboken as well, saying this is important stuff you can do. I feel like the next step, though, is yours. This is stuff that there are really great people here working on. But the next step is got to be local leaders. It has to be neighborhood groups. It has to be people stepping up and asking their mayors, their city councils, their elected and appointed officials, their neighbors to think differently about traffic safety. We are not going to solve this last amount. Like, we have dramatically made our roadways safer. We're not going to solve that last persistent amount, tens of thousands of people every year, without us in local communities thinking differently about our streets. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you to our panelists for all the work that you've done, and keep doing what you can to build a strong town. Let's go make our streets safer and better places to be.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.